plan for today. We got to leap right into this. We got a lot to do. I know you're super excited. We're going to talk about Little Boy right from the jump. So if you need to, and you probably do, go ahead and pull that up in some form or fashion if you haven't already. I meant to say this last time, but there's always a lot I mean to say. Sometimes I forget. Be thinking, especially at this stage, because we've done it a couple times now, about what works best for you. What I mean by that is, I can't use the screen to talk about a poem. I'm not saying I couldn't do it, but something about having like a page in my hand. If I want to take notes, I'm going to write on that page. Like it helps me with however my brain works. So if I were in this class, I would probably print the poem out just to have it. And like I said, I could underline something, or I could, that just works for me. That may not be you. The screen may be perfect, whatever. But at some point as a student in a class like this, you got to try to take a little bit of inventory or when it comes to your process, if that makes sense. Anyway, Little Boy, and this is only for me, is on page 67. All right, we're going to start in the same place we did last time with old men playing basketball, okay? Because the process is always the same. But we're going to move a good bit quicker through those first couple steps because we're going to go further today, all right? All that said, what's the first thing we got to do?
Read.
Thank you. Little Boy. The sun lowers on our backyard in Kansas, and I'm looking up through the circling spokes of a bicycle, asking my father as mindlessly as I would ask if he ever saw DiMaggio or Mantle, why we dropped the bomb on those two towns in Japan. And his face goes all wooden, the eyes freezing like rabbits in headlights, the palm of his hand slowly tapping the arm of a lawn chair that has appeared in family photographs since 1945. The shadow of my mother thrown across it, the green Packard in the background, which my father said he bought because after Saipan and Tinian and Okinawa, I felt like they owed it to me. These were names I didn't know, islands distant as planets, anonymous. Where is Saipan? Where is Okinawa? Where is the Pacific? Could you see the cloud in the air like the smoke from Eugene Messenbaum's semi? That huge cloud when he rolled it out on Highway 54 last winter? The hand is hammering the chair arm, beating it. And I know it's all wrong as I move backward on the garage floor and watch his eyes watching the sun in its evening burial and the spreading silver light and then darkness over the farms and vast flat fields, which I will grow so tired of, so weary of years later that I will leave, watching then as I do now his eyes as they take in the falling rag of the sun, a level stare, a gaze that asks nothing and gives nothing, the sun burning itself to ashes constantly, the orange maze blackening in drought and waste, and he can do nothing, and neither can I. You got to really control your breath on the last half. Not a lot of pauses. That's going to matter, by the way, but we'll see if you pick up on that. All right. Just for a moment. We're not even going to do this part as long as we did last time. Well, two things. One, I want you to look back through the poem. Anything you notice, anything that might be potentially significant. Part two to this, it's kind of my hope you've done this already, but we'll see. So take just a beat. Look back over the poem, maybe look over your notes, I don't know. See if you can mine anything for us to talk about. Take a minute. All right, I told you to be quicker. You might notice anything. Or again, did you come in with anything? Blow my mind right now and tell me about your notes. Oh, go for it.
It's the stanzas and the first person.
Okay, yeah, it's one long thing. You could say one stanza, but it's just a huge block of text, which sometimes that matters, sometimes it doesn't. There's a certain part of the poem that we will talk about at some point, hopefully, that it absolutely does matter in this case. The fact that, to help you guys out a little bit, think about it this way. stanzas, just like paragraphs, you know, they're like a little breather just for a second. Even just in your head, I mean, you guys probably hate reading, to be quite honest, a lot of you. If you see the paragraph break is coming up, don't you get a little bit excited? You're like, I get to like stop for just a second. Hi there. Stanzas are the same way. This poem, though, is kind of relentless. You never get to stop. Legit, I was starting to run out of breath toward the end. I had to be really careful reading it. So what's that about? That's something to think about for sure. It's also first person, as you point out. Old Men Playing Basketball was in the sense that it was clearly from a person watching, but there wasn't a lot of I, right? So this is somebody telling us a story about themselves. So it's much clearer this time that it is somehow about the speaker, their life, something like that. Good. What's your name, miss?
How are you?
Hi. I appreciate it. All right. What else do you guys notice in the poem? Anything stand out? And again, you don't have to necessarily have a reading of this, but it's just like that is probably important. That,
Part where it says that his face was all wetted and the eyes sort of crazy like
who's he?
the father.
Good.
And the question that the little boy asked him was the father to have that reaction.
I think that question is pretty important, right? Isn't it? And I think this is pretty inarguable. Everything else in the poem, in some way, seems to come from that question. He asks that question, and his dad goes, and then from there it just rolls. What is this question that he asks?
Why they dropped the bomb on the 2 towns?
In Japan. What? Hey guys. What's he talking about, by the way?
The retaliation from World War II.
Yeah. The World War II, the atomic bombs, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Fun fact, I believe it's Nagasaki wasn't the target that day. The original target had clouds over it, so they couldn't see it. So they went and got Nagasaki instead. Isn't that a bitch? Anyway, why do you think the dad reacts the way that he does? Just like on a plot level, we're just thinking about these characters for a second. It's okay. You took a leap, you took a chance, and I appreciate that. We got to think back to what the poem gives us. We mentioned Japan here, and we mentioned a couple places. Kansas, but we had Saipan, Okinawa, all that. You know, we mentioned these places that I would guess the father probably went to. We would almost certainly assume the father is not Japanese. Because this is in America, this is in Kansas. It's not like we didn't have Japanese folks walking around. But if you know your history at all, we kind of did our best for a little while there to make sure actually they weren't walking around, if you take my meaning. So no, he's not Japanese. But he was almost certainly a veteran. We could go that far. Yeah, what's up?
It also says that they, we're talking like when it says they owed it to him.
Yeah.
It's not Japanese. He's not talking about.
Do you think the Japanese gave him that car? No. All right. So what we've identified here is there's some other players kind of in the background. It's not just a father and a son, even though they're at the center of this whole thing. But again, we have to address this. How does the father react? Maybe that'll help. His eyes freeze like rabbits in headlights. He doesn't say much of anything. The palm of his hand, he's kind of doing one of these against the chair, and he's just kind of staring off. How do you read that reaction?
It's not like you got PTSD.
That's a little strong too. I know why all of you do that. I mean, maybe not, but that's kind of sidesteps the question. You'll see why in a second. What's up?
He's angry or like has like flashback moments of
This is the hardest part about reading anything, okay? And this addresses your thing too. I've taught this poem for years. Every year I get papers about PTSD. So I'm gonna tell you right now, don't do it. And here's why. First of all, isn't it interesting? Both of you, and you guys said something, you're speaking for a lot of folks in this classroom right now, immediately went to PTSD. Isn't that weird? There's two distinct options here. Number one, you're damn right. Good for you. That is an option. And there's some evidence to support, I mean, clearly he's bothered. I'm not disputing that at all, okay? For sure. But the second option is, especially if you're all so quick to go to that, might there be a sort of stereotype or an expectation or like a cultural narrative that you're kind of tapping into, right? And again, that does not mean it's wrong necessarily, but it does mean you have a little bit of a bias that you have to check against, okay? I have it too, all right? Probably not as strong, because again, we're different generations, but my point here is always, 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 if you immediately have an answer, you gotta double check it. You gotta at least doubt yourself for a second. Much like the Japanese thing. Maybe, but then you gotta like really stop and go, but is it really? And here's my point. Why does he react the way that he does? What prompts it? What prompts this reaction? We have it in the poem. The question. What is he reacting to? It's easier than you guys are making it. What about the boy? Think about, what does the boy ask? Somebody say it for us again.
I say mindlessly asking, so nonchalant about it.
Yeah. How old do you figure this boy is, thereabouts?
He has to be young because he says something about a bicycle.
Something about a bike. He's talking about not knowing what the Pacific is. How old were you when you figured out what the Pacific Ocean was? 8 or something? Right? This is a kid. And he just asked his dad what? What is bothering his dad right now? He's about to have to break down to his kid some pretty wild stuff, right? That bothers him. So PTSD, none of that matters. That's not what the poem is about, okay? This is about a father and a son and some grappling with some kind of, I don't want the cat out of the bag too early, I want you guys to get there. But there's something in their exchange that matters, okay? That sets the dad down the path he's on, where he's very obviously upset, okay? All right, let's talk about that line for a second. I believe it is, I think it's that. This is for line breaks, by the way. When you have a line break, you put a slash in. I haven't counted the lines, so I'm just gonna assume that we've done that. Talk to me for just a second. Linguistically, according to the rules I gave you guys, I think last time, there's not a lot going on in these lines, right? Like, you guys could say this sentence, When you quote for language, you can do it because the way I'll describe it to you is sometimes there's heat to the language. Like you hear a word or a phrase and it like sticks with you, Like if you have a line in a song you really like, usually it's because there's some kind of heat to that language, whatever it might be. We don't have that here. But there's still some language in these lines that is interesting, that says more than you might have realized on first glance, okay? So I'm gonna ask you to try to find it. And if we struggle too much, I'll tell you. But is there anything that might be significant in these two lines here?
The line break.
Why?
Because it's just, without a line break, it's just, to the kid, it's like, why did we drop the bomb on those two towns? Not necessarily just Japan.
Good. This harkens back to what we talked about last time with do they still make love to their wives, right? Like, You could argue in a paper, perhaps, that the speaker's kind of telling on himself here a little bit. The original question, why did we drop the bomb on those two towns? I mean, in Japan, yeah, I mean, that's where it happened, but like, it's kind of saying that's what the kid's really worried about. Well, and obviously that. Talk to me about towns. When you hear that word, town, what do you picture? What's a town?
Like a small little close-knit
Yeah.
place where
Everybody more or less knows each other.
they
There's,
don't cause any harm to others, like they just stay within their town.
it's more innocent, right? Just in our conception, that word, as opposed to, for instance, city. And let's be real, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we weren't bombing towns. We don't really give a damn about towns. We're looking for numbers. We want cities. How's a city different from a town? Again, just connotatively. City's much bigger, more people, more buildings. Yeah, what's up?
So maybe
What'd you say?
more crime, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Just because when you put people together in close space, yeah. What's up?
More industry.
Yeah, which again is, if you're talking about war, that's why you. But it's something about. We do a similar thing with mass murderers, weirdly. Like, if you say a person's murdered like 3 people, in a weird way, that matters more to us than when you say a guy murdered like 33 people. Like, we're almost impressed by that, right? We make movies about those people. Because when the numbers get big, like it's almost like individuals disappear or something. Does that make sense? Now, I say all that to say, again, the kid says towns. We know that they're not. We could pretty easily, like, these are not towns. He calls them towns. There's a connotation here of innocence, which I kind of gave you, even though you were sort of saying that. And that everybody knowing each other. What is that? Like community, I guess? So in some ways, it's pretty heavily implied. The kid is asking, why do we drop the bomb on those innocent communities? That's a heavy question to ask your dad, right? Talk to me for another second, real quick. I'm kind of interested in this language. He doesn't say bombs. He says the bomb. What's that about? Yeah.
The atom bomb is referred to as the bomb.
The bomb. It's like the Ohio State, those assholes when they try to trademark the, by the way. There's something about the superlative though, and we all know it too. We all know, when you say the bomb, we know what you mean in this context. It's about power, like unique power. So aren't we saying, and again, to kind of tease out the implications here, hey Dad, why did we drop this uniquely powerful, historic thing on innocent communities in Japan, right? Why did we do that, Papa? And now how does Dad react? Not well, right? Why, do you think? Again, I think it's related to war, but we're pretty far from war now. Why is the dad so obviously upset when his son asks him this? Yeah. Why is he upset with that? I agree that it's... Okay, so what? I agree with you. I'm pushing on you some. So what? Why does it matter that he's like 6, 7, something like that?
He shouldn't have to know about those things.
He shouldn't know those
He
things.
shouldn't have to know about those things.
Because he knows enough to ask, so he knows a little bit.
Yeah. Because he's a kid, like, he should be, like, playing, like, enjoying.
He should be ignorant of these things. Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. Dad wants to protect his innocence. One of the weird catch-22s your parents have as you're growing up is they want you to know about the world, but they don't want you to know too much too early, right? Isn't there something about the idea of lost innocence? Innocence, by the way, is largely interchangeable with ignorance. If you don't know anything, you're innocent of it. The more you learn about the world, some of you were talking about jobs before class. The more you work with people, especially, don't you just get a little bit jaded with how shitty and or stupid people are, generally speaking? That's not something you have when you're a kid. Imagine talking to a 7-year-old and he's just like, I can't take any more of these fucking idiots. Like, wouldn't that blow your mind apart? That's not innocence talking back now. That's knowledge about the world and how dark it can be sometimes and how awful people can be sometimes. This is what's bothering the dad in this poem. Again, is that the boy knows enough. He's on a path now to real knowledge about, again, it's pretty dark stuff. Okay? So let's talk a little bit more about this. I'm going to direct our conversation at this stage for the sake of time. The boy asks why we dropped the bomb on those 2 towns in Japan. We don't hear from the dad. We mostly get actions, right, to tell us how bothered he is. But at one point, the dad says one thing. What is it? That's interesting. And again, it doesn't pass our original test. They owed it to me. That's a nothing statement, right? Who's they? I think it's Americans. Think about it for a second. I'm gonna get old. She's right there. It kills me. Because after Saipan and Tinian and Okinawa, quote, I felt like they owed it to me. I could see why you would say the Japanese, because those are Japanese places. But does anybody have any idea what the dad might be alluding to when he names those places? Do you have a guess? I mean, there were probably bases there. That's not why they're famous in this context. They're battles. They're famous battles. Saipan and Tinian, famous marine battles. Whole bunch of dudes died. Vicious fighting on like beaches, like horrific shit. That, if I'm being honest with you, is really interesting. I listen to podcasts. Anyway. So it kind of tells you he was at these places, these battles. And again, I could still see why on the one hand you might say they means the Japanese, but again, my question would be, I felt like they owed it to me. He's talking about this car he bought. How did he buy that car? Did you just say with money?
I thought you were gonna like slowly lead up to it.
No, we're doing it. I mean, yeah, no, it was just funny because it's like, I mean, yes, it wasn't seashells. How many seashells would you, anyway, where'd he get the money? The government, right? That's who pays you when you're in the military. U.S. government. Why did he go to these places? Was he sightseeing? No. You have orders when you're in the military as well, right? I felt like they owed it to me. Who's they? Yeah. Because after going through, probably, again, whatever real shit he went through in those places, he got back home and he's like, I'm buying myself exactly what car I want. Damn the rest. I felt like they owed it to me. Now, interesting here, and it should not be, because that's a nothing statement. Go back to the boy's question. What does he say? Does anything stand out to, if I'm promising you this word is important, does anything stand out now in the boy's question? Yeah. The boy says we. What's the implication here? Why we dropped the bomb on those two towns? What's that implying?
They're American.
Well, I mean, America did it, and we're America, so like we're part of it, right? What's the different implication here? I'm not in charge. I didn't decide. Nobody asked me. You know? Well, it's like, well, we vote in elections. It's like, yeah, and then they do everything we want all the time. What are you talking about? Right? It's freaking me out, too. So what's interesting here, again, in the boy's question, we get a lot about his worldview very quickly. We're all in this together. This is a pretty, in many circles, horrific thing, pretty intense, we'll say, thing historically, but we were in it together. Dad's like, no. They told me where and when to be and what to do. There wasn't a lot of me participating, right? What else might be different about these two worldviews, do you think, between the father and the son? For sure. Dad, the boy at one point asks, where is the Pacific, I believe is the question. Dad has been to Saipan and Tinian and Okinawa. He damn sure knows where the Pacific is, right? This perspective of the father is one of experience. And his son's, as we talked about earlier, is one of innocence. And when you recognize that, you can go back and look at what he says as opposed to what he says and kind of figure out what experience gets you, right? Because this is kind of at the beginning of the journey, this is at the end. So according to what we've laid out right here, what's one thing the poem is kind of arguing about innocence? What's an innocent way to see the world for this boy when it comes to American foreign policy, I guess? Is that too big a question? Talk to me about we. This has something to do with the boy's innocence, I'm telling you.
He sees everybody as being equal.
And together. And I mean, again, this will be easier for you guys than it is for me. You're closer to it. If you can try to put yourself back, not even when you're 6 or 7, maybe you're like 10, you know? Were you worried at all about Russia or China or no? You're what's up?
He thinks everybody should like get along. Like, why would we drop the bomb on?
Good.
We should all get along.
He has no answers for it. He's legitimate. He says asked as mindlessly, right? He has no frame of reference. He compares this question to asking about baseball players, right? It's just another thing to him. But part of that innocence is thinking that we're in it together. That everybody has a say, that nobody maybe might have to do or see a thing they don't want to, right? Any of that stuff. Dad, on the other hand, is a world of experience. He's much older. Again, he's seen some shit. And he says they. There's no we. It's they. And we said before, they is, in this context, the U.S. government, which is pretty accurate. How else would we describe they? Who's they to the father, do you think? People in charge. You're very quick. Good for you. It's people in charge. People with power. So look, a lot of this poem, especially the first 2/3, okay, is all about giving you different examples on how the dad is bothered and how the boy is kind of an idiot, okay? And I mean that with all love to the boy. Little people are stupid. Like, that's why they're cute, okay? So he compares the bomb to baseball players. He says, where's the Pacific? He talks about the cloud. Again, we know what that is, right? You probably have a mental image when he had the cloud. He goes, was it like when that semi pulled out on the highway? Was it that big? Little idiot. Yeah. So much of the poem is just giving you all these ways. It wants to make sure you know that the boy knows nothing. So that must be very important to the speaker's project, to make sure we realize that. The last third is different. It changes. Did anybody pick up on this, by the way? The change in the last third? If we look back over it, it starts right around, it's after that question about the semi. So the hand is hammering the chair arm. From there on down, it changes. Will you guys look back over that for just a minute? Does anything feel different to you? I'm trying to have you recognize something about that last third. Does anything stand out to you guys about that part? There's a couple things. Anybody want to take a shot? Yeah, go for it.
The chair, like how his friend beforehand, where he was tapping the chair, and then where he's hammering the chair now and beating him. Like,
It gets a little more intense, I suppose. Yeah. And it is a weird return to. We talk a lot about that chair. Actually, weirdly. Yeah. Okay. What do you have over here?
I was gonna say since like in the beginning you see that he was like really innocent, but I feel like feeding off his father's energy, he's like losing an ounce of innocence. Like he's starting to realize that okay, this is something big that's obviously.
I'd go harder than an ounce. There's a tonal shift. The tone is different, right? We talk about things like, and it takes us a couple lines. We get to the sun in its evening burial. Do you know what he's describing right there? Sunset. It's evening burial? Excuse me? How many times have you or a friend like goes watch the sunset? Maybe you have that kind of time right now. And God, it's just like the sun's being buried, right? You're not gonna hang out with that person anymore. Kind of dark motherfucker, right? Like, the spreading silver light darkness over the farms, the falling rag of the sun. Again, we're talking about sunset as a falling rag. But it's this part too. It's not just the tone, which is very, hard shift, very dark. He says, the sun in its evening burial, the spreading silver light, darkness over the farms and vast flat fields, which I will grow so tired of, so weary of years later that I will leave. What's he talking about? It's real quick again. It's 2 lines. I will grow so tired of, so weary of, I will leave, he says. He's tipped his hand here. He's giving us some important information. Yeah. Who's the speaker in this poem? Up to now, we've said it's a little boy. But what's he just told us? If he's gonna grow tired and weary and leave, who's telling us this? No. It's the boy, but he's an adult now. That's what it is. And you don't know that until the end. But you realize now he's looking back on a memory with his father. And again, we do this sometimes, but he realizes much later probably, I asked my dad a real question on that day, right? Because again, he doesn't even know how serious of a question it is as a little boy. But as an adult, you do. So everything now we can look back and say, okay, he's an adult looking back. He has this experience now that he didn't have then. And I would argue that's why the tone shifts so dramatically in the last third, because we're seeing more of his sort of present day mentality, okay? He knows the world isn't maybe as Disneyfied as you think when you're a kid. So let's talk about the rest now with that in mind. We got the sun and its evening burial. We got darkness. We get the fact that he's going to leave. Then we get the falling rag of the sun, a level stare, a gaze that asks nothing and gives nothing. The sun burning itself to ashes constantly, the orange maze blackening in drought and waste, and he, meaning the father, can do nothing, and neither can I. Those last couple lines, what is any of that? We got the sun burning itself to ashes constantly. We got drought and waste. The last line of the poem, he can do nothing and neither can I. About what?
Relationship.
Maybe.
Problems going on
Maybe. How do we, maybe to all of those. How do we get there from these last couple lines? I think we probably can. Yeah.
I just think comparing to the beginning when he says the sun lowers and then he has a different point of view on it when he's older at the end
Yeah.
because he realizes, so maybe just his point of view on how people are and that. there's
Oh, because
nothing-
we're having fun with sun there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. There's something going on there. I've never been quite sure what to do with sun. There's a lot of sun in the poem, like some wordplay stuff. But yeah, I mean that's definitely in play here with this notion of well, except maybe for the last one, because look, the sun burning itself to ashes constantly. Let's stop there. Let's give ourselves just one image. Now look, on the one hand, dark, super dark. But what does that even mean? The sun burning itself to ashes constantly. Do we have any astronomy nerds in here? Just me? Okay. Do you guys know what's going to happen to the sun in about 1 billion years? Okay, you all knew it. Yeah. Because that's how stars work. We won't be here. You and I, probably. But still, you know, it's going to swallow the earth, and shit's not going to be cool if you're on the earth then. So we end the poem with that. We end the poem with the death of the sun, like the literal sun, not the figurative boy. And then we talk about orange maize, so corn, blackening and drought and waste, and he can do nothing and neither can I. We can't do anything about the sun dying. What else can we do anything about? You guys named a couple. Potentially, maybe we can't do anything about their relationship. Why? Do you think?
They have two different viewpoints as he's grown up. Like maybe the dad still has his old viewpoint.
They sound pretty similar at the end.
Well,
We can come back to that. I forgot which one you said. You said something else.
problems in the world, like,
Okay, name me a couple if you don't mind. Like,
like you talk about pollution.
yeah, well, the drought and waste. Yeah, you can do small things, and there's after school specials. But generally speaking, yeah, there's not a lot we can do. Like on an individual level, you know? Yeah. What else can't you do if you think more about this poem? There's a couple other spots where it's like, I guess you really have a choice in that either. Think about the dad. What are some things the dad didn't really have much say in? Saipan and Tinian and Okinawa. Yeah. I mean, he could have said no, but that wouldn't have gone well for him, right? So, what does the dad have a say in this poem?
Whether or not to tell him about the bombs.
I guess. I mean, he could not tell him, and at least in the poem he doesn't. But is he going to stop his son from finding out? No. He already, I've erased it, but he knows enough to ask the question. So, yeah, he's going to find out. Especially in the 40s or 50s when this poem is occurring. It's kind of a big deal now. It was a really big fucking deal in the 40s and 50s, okay? Like, yeah, he's going to find out. What does the dad have control over, power over in this poem? It's easier than you think.
Control over his son because he's the dad.
I mean, insofar as like he can tell him when to go to bed and stuff. But again, with the conflict in this poem centers around knowledge, right? Innocence versus experience. And he cannot. And we find out because we see the son grown up.
The boy not going like into the Air Forces or armed like the dad did.
I mean, as far as the dad knows, if there's another draft, again, there's not much say you're going to have.
His innocence
Can he protect that?
when he was young. And that's
But
what
he's
was-
already on the road to finding out, right?
He can control.
I'm not saying he can't try, but I'm saying can he succeed?
Oh, no. But by himself.
So the last line, he can do nothing and neither can I, the speaker tells us. If you can't do anything to change anything, you have no what? What has the speaker learned? Because now he has experience of the world. What has he learned? He has no power. Yeah. When you're a kid, or unfortunately when you're like 18, 19, give or take, you might think you have some say and you could change the world. I'm sure somebody sold you on this school with that, mantra. And statistically speaking, some people do. They get billions of dollars and do things, but mostly, no. Mostly not. If you're this father, just like a farmer type dude in Kansas in the 40s, no. You can't do anything about any of this. You can't even stop your son from growing up, looking at the sunset and going, what a falling rag, right? You can't do that. That's what he's learned. He has no power. He has no agency. Fun. All right. What I want to do now, we're going to break out and do something a little bit different, but we're going to come back to the poem, hopefully, and use it to talk about it. Yeah, okay. All right. We'll talk about body paragraphs. Let's get excited. There are a couple ways to talk about body paragraphs. I was taught this way. It has served me well, so I'm going to teach it to you. Okay? It's called the 3 I's. So identify, illustrate, and interpret. What I want you to know before we launch into this, if learning these 3 words helps you remember how to write a body paragraph, do it. It helped me. I get mnemonic devices help me. Wait a minute. They may not though. What matters is what these pertain to, okay? And it is this. Every body paragraph is built this way. Every single one. Okay? You start with a topic sentence. You follow that up very quickly with specific evidence. So in our case, pretty much every time, if you're writing about a poem, what's your evidence probably going to be? A quotation, right? Yes. Then the bulk of your work, where your grade is won and lost for the most part, is analysis. That's where you talk about evidence to prove whatever claim you made in that topic sentence. Every single body paragraph, every single time, gets built that way. Okay? If you can do that reasonably well, you're probably gonna be all right in this class. This matters. Any questions before we move on? All right. We're gonna talk about the poem in this context, and hopefully we can make a little more sense. All right. So we talked about a lot of the poem. Are there any lines you guys might want to return to here for a second? We can try to talk about like a body paragraph sort of thing. Anything stand out to you with all the stuff we just said?
I felt like they wanted to be.
Okay, yeah, we could do a little more work with that. Okay. In my experience, and look, I've written more papers than you most likely ever will, okay? I'm not bragging, I promise. But I'm just saying, I've done this a lot. You guys will want to write, what, from the very first line of your paper to the very end? That's because most of your experience when it comes to writing papers is an in-class essay. You have no time. You're just screaming internally until your time is up, right? You got time for this. And there's an expectation that comes with that time that this should be better built, right? So what I'm telling you, and I'm spending a lot of time stressing it because I do this every semester and you still don't do it, is start your body paragraphs with evidence. Start with evidence. So in this case, a specific quotation. Later on, we'll do different kinds of text that may change, but start with some kind of evidence. Even if you have an idea, even if you think you have an argument, start with evidence, okay? So for instance, and again, I'm not counting right now, but we need to figure out the lines. All right. What else do we need for this quotation before we do anything else? We need something else. Good. I felt like they owed it to me. How do we arrive at that? Who says it? Dad says it about what? Yeah, but we kind of teased that out. Literally, what's he talking about?
Oh, the car?
Yeah. I'll probably butcher this a little bit, but like explaining I felt like they owed it to me. Okay? So we got the father says it, and we got why. For those of you keeping score at home, by the way, you're always worried about length. Look, imagine how long that's going to be when you type it, right? So give me context. All right. The next move, to the best of your ability, is analysis. And if you do enough analysis, it will lead you to an argument, and then we can talk about a topic sentence, okay? So I felt like they owed it to me. And we talked about this a bit. How might we start talking about this quotation? What language in this line matters? It's like we did this 10 minutes ago. Good. Let's talk about they real quick. What was the deal with they? If somebody remind me. But how did we get there? Huh? Okay. So, well, we got to build to that too. Let's start with the government, because I think that'll get us to there. How do we, and this is what analysis is I'm going to make an argument. I'm going to argue when he says they, he means the government. That's a claim. Why? Yeah, he doesn't say, I felt like the U.S. government owed it to me, right? It's something we got to prove. So that's when you know you have an argument. And explaining it is analysis. How do we do that? I felt like they owed it to me. How's that the government? Why is it not Japan? Why is it not, I don't know, anybody else? How do we know? Yeah. But what about it?
He got the car with the money from his work.
Yeah. All right. So we start there. So first of all, we're talking about both these things. It's not just they; it's they owed. That verb matters, right? He's referring to the money he received from the government. But how can we prove he's talking about the government here?
Because when in the question why we dropped the ball,
Uh-huh.
the father's not gonna have like the power of doing that himself. Like referencing the question he might have.
Yeah, well, we can build to that, but that's a different. Let's for now, let's not bring in another quotation because that's a whole other thing. So let's slow down a little bit. How do we prove this point? Using just this quotation and or the context thereof. If you need to, sometimes it helps. Go back to the poem. What happens just before this quotation? What are we talking about?
Talks about the battles.
Good. Good. We need a little more context, don't we? So he is referencing the money he received from the government, which he got for wartime experience. Importantly, and we didn't actually talk about this before, talk to me about this verb, owed. Especially how he says it. I felt like they owed it to me. What does it mean when you talk about somebody owing you something? Yeah, and then here, sorry.
Oh, because he did something for him, so now they gotta pay him back for it?
Yeah, there's a transaction, something.
That's exactly what that
Wow. Yeah. Good. And that's kind of the denotation, right? The dictionary definition of owing something. What's the connotation? Yeah.
I don't know. Like I do something for you, so I kind of expect.
There's an expectation.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And if you haven't done this, don't make the mistake. But isn't there a weird moment when your friend owes you money and they haven't paid you for a while and you see them like they have like a new shirt or something? You're like, what the fuck? Right? When somebody owes you something, there's an expectation that needs to be met. There's a potential for conflict in that, right? So that tells you there's some kind of issue maybe between the father and this they that we've started to pretty strongly argue as a government, right? What might that issue be? Now we're spinning off into more analysis. None of this is on the page, right? This is something we're going to have to... Why does he say it like that? I mean, because again, devil's advocate, he could just say, I bought it with the money I got for, GI stuff. But he says it this way. I felt like they owed it to me. I thought you knew what was going on. I thought you both did the same move.
Fairness.
Okay, maybe. Why?
What they made him do, what he didn't want to do.
Well, okay, so what's very difficult to prove in this poem is whether or not he wanted to do these things. But what is easy to prove is that he was made to do them. You see what I'm saying? That's an important difference. So I don't know if we could go quite that far. But look, nobody likes to be made. You guys have to listen to me right now. Some of you are fading fast. It's hard to be made to do something. It just is. Point of fact, if I wasn't paid, I wouldn't be here right now. There are worse jobs, but I could be playing Madden. You know what I'm saying? So we're basically arguing his disdain is too strong a word, but I can't think of another one right now. His disdain for they arises from being made to do all of these things. Again, he names famous battles, Saipan, Tinian, Okinawa. At no point, and this is almost a given, but you would need to say this, at no point would anyone suggest he just went there for kicks, right? He was ordered to go, along with a whole lot of other people. So now we've returned to our larger argument a little bit. What does it turn out we're really talking about here? If he, well, I almost had the word, damn it, resents. He resents being made to do something, right? That's really what I want instead of disdain. This is coming back to a bigger question. What's his problem with they? Or why does he say they owed it to me? Why does that matter to him? We're talking about the government. We're talking about having to go to war. Most likely getting drafted.
Because they made him go.
Yeah. Well, what does that mean? What's that tell us about the relationship between him and they?
They want all the power.
Good.
Very one-sided relationship.
When it comes to power, yeah. But just for a moment, he's got him. Power, like capital P, owes me. I'm gonna get myself a fucking car. Right? But if he's being made to do it, doesn't have power. He doesn't. The one decision, I asked you guys earlier, you couldn't really come to one. The one thing he chooses is that car. That was it. That was his expression of all the power he's allotted, is he bought that car. How small is that? Right? Like how minute his power must be if that's what he was able to choose. So what, well, two questions. Sidebar, what time is it?
12 o'clock.
Thank you. So what might we be driving toward, if you'll pardon the pun here? We're not really arguing he doesn't have power. We could do that at some point, but that's a different line. That's probably the last line of the poem, right? What are we arguing? It's something about the dad, it's something about power, but it's a little more specific than he doesn't have it, right? He says they owed it to me, meaning the people that are in power, meaning the people that make decisions, that tell thousands, if not millions of other people what to do, right? But they, meaning powerful, owed it to me, meaning the little guy. What's he telling us here? Again, maybe about his relationship to power or something. What do you think? This is the hard part, by the way. But this is also, I'm going to say shit that doesn't make any sense to most of you a lot. This is the money down, if you're familiar with football at all. This is the important part. Power owed it to me. And then I made my decision. I used my power. But what are we saying about power for this guy who's like an everyman? He's just like kind of somewhat typical American dude in the 50s, you know? I'm so curious what's going on in any of your brains right
You
now.
definitely agree with him having so much power.
He for damn sure doesn't like it. That we could say, right? And so I guess if you don't like a thing, you inherently disagree, right? But I don't know, and you didn't say this, okay? But I want to be very careful we don't go so far as to say, like, he thinks something needs to happen, right? Something needs to change, because again, we don't get that. But yeah, he pretty clearly doesn't appreciate, like, the setup, you know, whatever it is. I would agree with that, okay? So what? I mean, if we kind of keep that in mind when it comes to his perspective, what does it mean then that he says this? How does he say it even? That may help you a little bit. When with that in mind, how do you hear him say, I felt like they owed it to me? Contempt? Yeah, a little bit, maybe.
Saying like he's on
A little bit, like a little bit celebratory almost?
Yeah.
I said like stern.
Yeah, well, it seems like this guy, everything he says is pretty... Yeah, you had a hand back there too, I think.
I don't know, I kind of think back to our experience, like from that experience, he has no say, like he's telling his son, like, sometimes you get no say, since you like have to do it.
But sometimes you do, right? All right, you just did a lot of things really quickly. All right, so let's do this. We're going to cobble together a terrible topic sentence, and then we're going to try to make it better, okay? But you all just laid out a couple pieces I think we could use. Number one, and we kind of forgot this because we went down the power rabbit hole, the dad in this poem is the kind of voice of experience, right? I don't even know how to do it. Dad equals experience. And we probably need to prove this, by the way. This would be in a different body paragraph, but that would be easy. We're not doing that. All right, dad equals experience. And then the question is, what is experience telling us here? It's that he doesn't have very much power, if any, but actually he has a little. He has a little. Okay. I might even, you want to go to that other board. Sorry. I get really self-conscious. Like if I were sitting out there and I heard me screaming, I'd be so upset. I'm gonna do this really quickly. I know we're almost out of time, but we're almost done as well. When you write a sentence, just a sentence, what do you need? You know this. Subject and a predicate. How educated you are. Yes. What the hell does that mean?
What the sentence is about and what you're doing.
Good. You need a thing, and that thing has to be doing something. The shortest sentence in the Bible, Jesus wept. Subject, verb. That's a sentence. That's it. Topic sentences obviously are the same. So we need a subject, and we need that subject doing something. If you go back to the scoreboard here, and we're just taking shots in the dark for a second. What's probably our subject going to be? What thing from the poem are we focused on in this paragraph? With your chest? Yeah. What's he and this is going to be trickier, but with our evidence, what's he, again, doing in the poem? Like, we're not making an argument yet, okay? The dad does this. What's he doing? If you had to describe it. You guys are making me nervous. What time is it? I will run to the gun. Okay. What's the dad doing in this poem? Yeah. What do you say about there? Yeah. About the car, though, not about the. Yeah. So dad. All right, we'll try it. Like something about. Fuck me. Dad tells son about buying the car. That's literally what's happening. Okay. That's our subject. Everything after that is our predicate. Because that's our verb, and that's what the verb modifies. That's a sentence. Now, importantly, for our purposes, the topic sentence is supposed to be an argument. It's supposed to be a claim. I don't think anyone would be under the misconception that this is an argument, right? This is literally what happens. Please don't do this. But the way topic sentences work, generally, you can do this, but then you need a last part where you explain to me why this matters, why this is important. So the fact, and it's a fact in the poem, that the dad tells his son about buying the car. That happens. But what do we end up talking about? We do. What about it?
How we have power with the dad has kind of like the general one very the power.
But just that, right? So dad tells his son about buying the car. I'm gonna get a little stupid and artistic here, I'm sorry. Oh, I just forgot how to spell again. We field? That looks wrong. Do I switch those? You get it. This is our argument. This is not in the poem, right? If I just walked into class right when we started and I was like, you know, that happened, right? That part, you guys would be like, you gotta break that down, bro. That's what we're gonna do in the paragraph. That's our job, okay? And I told you, and we don't have time, so don't freak out. I told you this sentence isn't awesome. It's not. It's kind of gross. But it works. This is what we're pointing to in the poem. If you go back to our evidence, specifically, that is exactly what we're describing in the paragraph. That's fine. But this last part is our argument. Again, this is where your grade is won and lost. You gotta at least attempt this part for me. And I'm stressing it because, again, some of you won't. Some of you won't even try. Some of you will just give me everything before the slash. I know that. I've read it. Try the last part. Be wrong, even. But try. Okay? Questions about anything we talked about? I know we're pretty much out of time. I got to stop saying that last part because you guys, if anything, I know you are prepared for a fire drill. Like you are out of here. I'll get a stiff arm to the face and you. All right. For next time. Hopefully all right. For next time, you got to read Body and Soul. Again, that's on course 10. That poem's a little longer. It's like 4 pages or something. I know. But I still have a sneaking suspicion that some of you are reading these like right before class or something. Give yourself a little more time. A little more time. Okay? Also, you have a body paragraph due to course 10. We just did it. Granted, we did it in notes. But you can do this. Start with evidence. Do your absolute best to talk about why that evidence. And look, by the way, we didn't have time to like go down really awful roads. Sometimes you're just going to be flat and wrong. Sometimes you're going to realize you've done a thing for like 10 minutes and you're going to go, I'm fucking stupid. That's all right. That's part of the process. Erase that and try again. Or try different evidence. Maybe what you picked, you thought was good, turns out it's trash. That happens too. That's all right. But start with evidence. When you get rolling, I think you'll kind of recognize it, see where that takes you, and then, to the best of your ability, try to put a topic sentence up top. That's your homework. All right, I'll see you next week. Thank you.